All right, I will call this meeting of the Senate Judiciary Committee to order. Would the secretary please take the roll?
Senator Harris, Senator Orenshaw,
Here.
Senator Dondero Loop, Senator Wynn, Senator Hansen, Senator Krasner, Senator Stone, Chair Scheibel.
Here. Please mark the senator not currently here present when she arrives. Welcome, everybody, to Senate Judiciary. We have two bill hearings today. I will go ahead and open up the hearing on AB 17. Whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the committee, for the record, my name is John McCormick. I'm the Assistant Court Administrator at the Supreme Court. Last name is McCormick. And with me today is Chief Judge Kevin Higgins from Sparks Justice Court. And we're here to present AB 17, and this is a relatively simple bill. Hopefully I'm not jinxing myself when I say that, but I could be. In Section 1, what this bill does is there is a statutory requirement that came about in 1983 that requires a person who's a person who is complying and completing their community service requirement related to a first or second DUI to wear distinctive garb that identifies the person as having violated the provisions of NRS 44C110 or 44C120, and all this bill does is remove that distinctive garb requirement. It doesn't actually change the community service requirement or anything else. So.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel, Kevin Higgins from the Sparks Justice Court. This is really kind of a historical anachronism that we're just trying to fix. What it boils down to is most of the counties and the cities no longer have county or city-run community service programs. So we rely on the Boys and Girls Club, the food bank, the animal shelter to do the community service. And we have no way to encourage them or require them to put people in distinctive garb. It's a requirement that we're supposed to do that we can't comply with. I guess at the time it made sense, and then when we produced at City of Sparks and Sparks Justice Court, we had a van that went around, and all our people got on the van. They could put the orange vest on them, and it worked fine. But to tell the folks that we have to put distinctive garb on it has become rather difficult. It's difficult as it is to get any community service done, especially COVID and post-COVID. Nobody wanted community service. And so we're lucky when we have somebody that allow, get in to do your 20 or 30 or 40 hours. It doesn't change the requirement. I don't think there's any evidence anywhere that wearing a distinctive garb that says you violated 484C110 does anything. I don't think it's preventative, and the statute doesn't even define what that is. So we're not even sure what distinctive garb is. I think it's, at the risk of jinxing it, I think it's a cleanup provision, and that anything we can do to encourage people to do their community service and have more places where they can do their community service, I'd be in support of. I misquoted, on the assembly side, I went to high school with Assemblywoman Hansen, and we had the same English teacher, and I said, oh, remember we read that in the House of Seven Gables, and she says that was the Scarlet Letter, Judge Higgins. And I go, well, I guess you were paying attention to Mrs. Green's class, and I was not. So, but it's really kind of that shaming thing that I don't think really has any utility these days, but it was the Scarlet Letter. So thank you if you have any questions.
Thank you both very much. Are there any questions from members of the committee? All right, Senator Krasner.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. So a lot of the people that are engaged in community service because they were found to be guilty or convicted of driving under the influence of alcohol or controlled substance, they're on the side of the freeway. So that orange vest, I always thought it was to make sure that drivers see them. Is that not correct?
John McCormick for the record. Generally, a lot of community service does not happen on the side of the highway anymore, and if they were in that situation picking up garbage on the side of the road, they'd still have the reflective vest for safety. The reflective vest would just not have to say that I violated the provisions of NRS 484C110. So it wouldn't impact the ability, if they were doing that, to have adequate safety, OSHA compliant safety stuff. It just doesn't have to say that they violated the provisions of the statute.
Senator Hansen.
Thanks, Madam Vice Chair. This would only apply to DUI situations, right? I mean, because you still have people work on the side of the roads from, you know, they call it not minor prison, but the work camps and so forth. I think they still wear stripes and stuff. I mean, this is strictly limited to trying to get people to go with the Boys and Girls Club and not have to wear a orange vest or something, right? That's what we're doing here?
John McCormick, for the record, yes, Senator. All this does is remove that specific requirement that the distinctive garb identify them as having violated the statute.
And they're still using distinctive garb in traditional prison settings when they're working along roadways or whatever?
That is my understanding.
Okay, so we're just trying to get to one little tiny window. I got it. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Krasner.
So just clarifying then what my colleague said, this, and looking at the bill, it only applies to persons who have been convicted of driving under the influence of alcohol or controlled substance, that we're trying to remove the garb that's designated that they violated the law. It does not apply to the Boys and Girls Club children.
John McCormick, for the record, that is correct, Senator. All it does is take away that little specific piece.
All right. I don't see any other questions, so we will move on to testimony in support of AB 17. Anybody wishing to give support testimony in person is invited to the front of the room in Carson City or Las Vegas. Looks like we have some folks in Carson City who want to testify. Go ahead whenever you are ready. You'll have 2 minutes each.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Erica Roth, ERICAROTH, on behalf of the Washoe County Public Defender's Office, testifying in support. I think there's a lot of barriers that our clients face, and something that's quite inconsequential is a so-called scarlet letter is not another barrier that we need to keep in place. And this would just similarly situate people who have been convicted of DUIs doing their community service with anyone else who's doing community service for another misdemeanor violation. So it's, I think, a cleanup that just makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. John Puro from the Clark County Public Defender's Office. I'd like to thank the AOC for bringing this bill forward. We do agree that I think there's limited utility in shame. There's utility in consequences. There's utility in teaching somebody how to right their actions, but limited utility in shaming somebody. In fact, I think it further separates somebody and makes it harder to reintegrate if you're always feeling terrible about yourself. So I think this is a good measure to remove some of the shame that we've had in our criminal justice system about certain things and actions, and allowing people to work their way back. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Vanessa Dunn, VANESSA-DUNN, and I'm here on behalf of NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Nevada chapter. NAMI Nevada supported AB 17 in the Assembly and will continue their support here on the Senate side. AB 17 is a good step in the destigmatization of mental health and substance abuse disorders. Thank you for your consideration of this bill.
Thank you all for your testimony. I don't see anybody in Las Vegas, so we'll go to the phones for testimony in support of AB 17.
If you would like to testify in support of AB 17, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. We have no callers to testify in support.
All right, then we'll go to opposition on AB 17. And I don't see anybody coming to the front in Carson City or Las Vegas to give in-person testimony. So we'll go to the phones for testimony in opposition to AB 17.
We have no callers in the queue to testify in opposition.
All right, then we'll move to neutral testimony. Anybody wishing to testify in the neutral position is invited to do so now, but I don't see anybody wishing to give in-person testimony, so we will go to the phones for neutral testimony on AB 17.
We have no callers to testify in the neutral.
All right, then that brings us to the end of testimony. Unless the presenters have any concluding remarks, that will conclude the hearing on AB 17. I will now close the hearing. Thank you so much for being here and answering all of our questions, and move on to the hearing on AB 183. I believe we are joined by our presenter via Zoom, and you can go ahead whenever you are ready.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and members of the Senate Judiciary. I am Bridget Duffy, BRI-GID, DUFFY, Assistant District Attorney for the Juvenile Division in Clark County. I have the honor of presenting to you this afternoon AB 183. AB 183 comes from the Nevada Coalition to Prevent the Commercial Sexual Exploitation of Children, which I will now call CSEC. SEC, because that's a mouthful for the rest of this hearing. I was appointed by Governor Sandoval in 2016 to be the member of that coalition, and I have remained on the coalition over the last 7 years. We have representation from Clark, Washoe, the rural, which includes child welfare agencies, attorneys who represent children, judges, our survivors, nonprofit advocacy and service providers, and law enforcement members, to name a few. As a coalition, we've had the fortune of recommending policy changes over the past several sessions. During this interim, our work group identified as one of our priorities improving our ability for early identification of children who are being exploited or who are at risk of being exploited. Children who have experienced trauma in their lives are at high risk to become victims of predators, and the sooner we can identify our children who are being exploited, the better opportunity we have to prevent them from that continued exploitation. Two areas where children who have experienced trauma often land in our state are child welfare systems and the juvenile justice system. So enter AB 183, which adds screening requirements to child welfare agencies, juvenile justice agencies, and regional facilities for the treatment and rehabilitation of children or state-run detention facilities. That screening would assist in determining if a child is a victim of exploitation or at high risk of victimization. So quickly to walk through the bill, Section 1 removes current statutory language that is no longer needed because it's now found in Section 2. Section 2 adds a requirement to Chapter 62C for juvenile justice agencies to screen any child who is taken into custody and detained in our local detention facility to determine whether that child is a victim of commercial sexual exploitation. And if they are screened in as a victim, the agency must then report that to our, as pursuant to our mandated reporting requirements, to a child welfare agency under NRS 432C. This section further provides that the screening tool must be reliable for the age of the child being screened. And currently, just so you all know, we do not have screening tools that are validated for children under the age of 10. So that's why we just have a general statement that it would be for the age of the child being screened. But hopefully, if we have developed tools that are evidence-based, in the future, we will be able to use those for children under the age of 10. It also excludes the requirements if we do not have that screening tool for use. Section 3 adds the same requirements that are in Section 2 to children who are committed to a juvenile court, by a juvenile court to a residential facility for the treatment or rehabilitation of children or a state-run detention facility. Section 4 adds the same requirements to local detention facilities for children. Section 5 adds the requirement for the screening to NRS 432B for all children who are placed in a child welfare agency's custody. And Section 6 adds the new mandated reporting requirements into NRS 432C based on the screenings in Sections 2 and 3. So that's our bill. And I just like to emphasize for you that this bill has nothing to do with me being a ADA. I was just the lucky person appointed from the commission to present it to you. And so this is not about identifying children to prosecute them. It is not about identifying traffickers. It is identifying children who are victims of sexual exploitation so that we may put services in place to support the victim and prevent the continued victimization for our vulnerable youth. So thank you for your time, your work on behalf of all of us, and I'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. Questions from the committee? Senator Orenshaw.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Ms. Duffy for presenting the bill. I know certainly, I think these are some of the most heartbreaking cases that I think many of us see, whether we're on the defense side or the prosecutorial side, and I I like the bill. This is already being done, I believe, right? This will just put it in a statute. And I appreciate it, and I appreciate any help that that these children can get. So thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Duffy.
Senator Orenshaw, thank you for the question. This is Bridget Duffy for the record. Yes, this is already being done. Identifying it as a priority to put it into statute was with the assistance of several national organizations who look at how Nevada does with assisting children. I presented at the interim, during the interim, regarding our desire to have this put into statute based upon some recommendations that came out in a report of how Nevada does with their children.
Thank you, Ms. Duffy. Thank you, Chair.
All right, any other questions? I'm not seeing any other questions, so thank you. We will move to testimony in support of AB 183, starting with anybody in person in Carson City.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and committee. My name is Beth Schmidt, SCHMIDT. I represent the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. LVMPD, we support AB 183 and the adopted amendment. We believe that this bill will help us to more efficiently identify, respond to, and investigate the allegations of commercial sexual exploitation of children. And in turn, that will allow us to better serve children and provide more and appropriate services. We want to take this just a moment to say thank you to the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Judiciary and also to the Clark County ADA, Bridget Duffy, for their diligent work on this, and we do support this bill.
Good afternoon, Raken Comas with R&R Partners representing Awaken. I would echo the comments of Sergeant Smith, and we'd like to voice our support. Thank you.
And we'll take remarks from Las Vegas now. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and members of the committee. This is Jeff Rogan representing in support for AB 183 for the reasons that Ms. Duffy said. We believe this will help us identify more youth who have been sexually exploited and who are in need of services. I'd also like to thank the entirety of the CSEC committee for working diligently on this and bringing this to the legislature. Thank you.
All right, I don't see anybody else to give in-person support testimony on AB 183, so we'll go to the phones for support testimony on AB 183.
Chair, we have 0 callers in the queue at this time.
All right, then we will go to testimony in opposition to AB 183. And I don't see anybody in person coming up to give opposition testimony, so we will go to the phones.
Chair, we have no callers to testify in opposition.
All right, then we will go to neutral testimony. Anybody wishing to give neutral testimony is invited to the front, but I don't see anybody coming up, so we'll just check one more time if there's anybody on the phone to give neutral testimony.
Chair, we have no callers for neutral.
All right, then that brings us to the conclusion of the bill. Unless you have any closing remarks, Ms. Duffy? All right, then that brings us to the conclusion of the hearing. I will now close the hearing and move on to everybody's favorite part of the meeting, public comment. I don't see anybody coming up to give public comment in person, so we will go to the phones for any public comment.
We have no callers for public comment.
All right, looks like we have completed our business for the day. Judiciary will be canceled on Monday and Tuesday to allow for more floor time for the Senate as a whole. We will be back on Wednesday, so be on the lookout for that agenda. Until then, we are adjourned.